Well, welcome to our forum on public higher education in central Wisconsin. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us here at the UW Center for Civic Engagement. I'm Glenn Moberg of Wisconsin Public Radio, and with the help of our region's leaders in public higher education, we wanted to discuss together not only the challenges that confront us, but also the big picture objectives and the goals of higher education in Wisconsin and the region. With us this evening are Mark Bradley, a member of the UW System Board of Regents and a Wausau resident. Also Dr. Keith Montgomery, Dean of the University of Wisconsin-Marathon County. Dr. Bernie Patterson, Chancellor of the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, and Dr. Lori Wires, the President of North Central Technical College. This is going to be a bit informal. I think our attendance today might have been hurt a little bit by the budget hearing that's going on North Central Technical College's Health and Sciences building. But let's start out with some of the current issues related to the state budget and how the proposed cutbacks to higher education will have an impact on us, the people who live in the region, and also the students and the families who choose public higher education in north central Wisconsin. First, to clarify some of the distinctions between the technical colleges, the two-year UW schools, and then the four-year universities, let's start with the state budget and how it directly affects individual institutions. Dr. Lori Wires, North Central Technical College is announcing layoffs this week. That's probably a good starting point for us.
Well, thank you, Glenn, and thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening. You'll probably see in the paper tomorrow, just met this afternoon with Wausau Daily Herald about our layoff situation at our college. I'd like to just give you some background information. First of all, the technical college produces the workers for 250,000 new jobs that Wisconsin is seeking. 80% of the new jobs will require something beyond a high school diploma, but less than a baccalaureate degree. Currently, right now, there's 26,000 skilled jobs available out in the state of Wisconsin, and many of those jobs will be provided by the training that comes from the Wisconsin Technical College system. Even in a very bad recession and economy, 88% of our graduates were employed in their field after 6 months after graduation. We're also very proud of the fact that 1 in 9 working adults attends the technical college system. That's over 400,000 taxpayers that are part of the technical college system. In the budget that is being proposed by Governor Walker, the state support for the technical college systems and what we call about our state aids would be reduced 30% this year and then an additional 30% the following year. That is the biggest cut of any of the higher ed institutions, remembering the fact that 80% of those jobs that they're going to need skill sets for come from the technical college system. On top of that, a local levy freeze has been imposed as part of that, with the property evaluations being the lowest in 59 years. So one of the challenges for the technical college system in this budget is dealing with severe cuts and trying to figure out how we're going to continue to serve dislocated workers, how we're going to continue to have sections and things open and available to students. The things impacted at a local level from NTC is it will seriously impact our ability to provide services to our regional campuses throughout our district. It will impact several of our programs and the number of students that we'll be able to take into those programs, increasing our waiting list. In addition, we are going to be cutting a few programs. We are cutting our counseling services, and we'll have to look for another way for us to provide support to students. We are also very concerned about the impact it's going to have on some of our new initiatives in order to continue to operate our Center of Excellence in Agriculture, our Center of Excellence in Wood Technology, which was driven again by our business and industries, and how we're going to be able to respond to that flexibility for business and industry. So obviously we are very concerned, and I just want to leave you with one thought as I talk about this. If job creation is a state priority, then your technical college system must be a priority also. Thank you.
A pretty substantial cut there, 30% to the technical college system. The UW system not faring quite so poorly, but still an 11% cut has to concern you, Bernie Patterson.
It certainly does, and the fact that the technical system's being cut like they are also concerns us, because we're partners in the educational process, and we receive a number of students, a large number of students from the technical schools as well as the two-year schools, and so we feel it when they don't have the resources to deliver their programs. Specifically on our campus, Glenn, it's going to mean larger classes, for example. We're going to quickly become the place where you can take political science with 500 of your best friends if you want to do that. That's an unfortunate situation. It's going to mean fewer learning opportunities for our students. It's going to mean less interaction between our students and our faculty because we'll have more students and fewer faculty. It's going to mean it's going to be more difficult to recruit faculty to our system, to this state. I spent 30 years of my career outside of this state, and I can tell you flat out that the university system of Wisconsin is seen as the very best in the country. And when we're in the news like we've been in the past 3 months, we've had people drop out of searches. We've had people retire sooner than we would like for them to retire. The list goes on and on. But not to be overlooked on this list is that it's going to be a higher cost to the students. And when state support continues to go down and down and down, the reaction to that has to be an increase in tuition. So when the decision is made to fund the university system at a lower rate, that you're also at the same time making the decision to increase tuition and therefore shift the burden to the students, which then reduces access for our students here in the state of Wisconsin.
You know, this business of larger class size, many students look at schools like UW-Stevens Point, UW-Eau Claire, UW-La Crosse, the other UW schools, because they're attracted to the idea that they won't have to sit in a class with 500 other students with a teaching assistant teaching. And you're telling us that maybe they better get ready for that.
Well, if the state continues to reduce funding for higher education, there will be no choice.
Dean Montgomery, how do you see an 11% budget cut affecting the curriculum, the students, the faculty, the programs here at UW-Marathon County?
Well, I don't want to just repeat what Bernie said. Let me just pick on one thing. That when you're a transfer institution, one thing that's very important is advising for students. In fact, it makes good financial sense. If you can provide advising, then the students can pick the correct courses and they can transfer and they can graduate much more efficiently. If we've got a 11% cut to GPR, it means that we conceivably may not be providing the same advising to students. So in the long run, that actually might mean an increase in cost to students if they have to self-advise. And sometimes they don't make the right choices there. So I certainly share Bernie's concern about a number of sections, about some diversity in timetabling and scheduling of classes as well. But advising is also one piece. So it affects student services, or could conceivably affect student services.
And Mark Bradley, how do you see these cuts affecting the entire UW system?
Well, when you look at the regional campuses like Chancellor Patterson's, there's this 11% cut. The system in total, the 13 two-year colleges, the 13 four-year campuses around the state, and then UW Extension, which is all 72 counties. When you roll that up in total, there's about a $340 million reduction in just the money that is needed to open the doors this year, or next year, the same way the doors were opened this year. That's a pretty significant cut. And I would mention that large cut is 9 years after the former governor cut $250 million out of the UW system. So it's not like the system got big, it looks like we have a tough economy, less revenue, we're going to have to now make some adjustments. This is a huge adjustment after a huge adjustment.
Go
Well,
on,
I
Keith.
think that's a very good point. I think it's not just the cuts that's been done this year. If you look at the cumulative cuts over the past 8 years, it's a continuous adjustment that's having to be made, and it just seems to me that maybe at the beginning you might say there's some fat in the system, but now you're getting, as Mark said this afternoon, now you're really getting down to the bone.
I just want to comment too, the technical college system has seen virtually no change in state aid since 2000. And also before that, we started out about 33% of our funding. With this recent cut, we'll fall below 10% that the state is contributing. And now tuition has actually gone into second place. Obviously, the tax levy, the property taxes that you all pay for the technical college system, I just want to state a fact that NTC has grown 46% in 4 years that I've been president, and the total budget that has increased has been 1% total over 4 years. Want you also to know that this year we are running with a below zero balanced budget and are still up another 5%, so that'll take us over double enrollments. We've been supported by the Taxpayer Alliance all 4 years that I've been president. I will stand tall in our budget and how we've run it and the things we've done. And so I wanted to state that point as well. So in higher ed, all of these state aids have been eroding over time. And it's getting to a point where there will be very hard decisions for all of us to make on how we're going to serve students. And I think it's very obvious that more education you have, the better per capita income you have, and we continue to fall behind the other states. We used to be ahead of Minnesota. We've dropped way below Minnesota per capita income. We're starting to see some real changes that are not going to be positive for economic recovery. And also, the two-year UWs and the technical college system. The technical college system, I don't know if you know this, but is the largest transfer institution to the UW system. And then you have UW colleges. So baccalaureate degree and continuing education is going to be very important. And many of the students at NTC and the other technical colleges are looking for a stepping stone of continuing their education. So we've worked very hard as a team. We work together with our Higher Ed Alliance, where we look at ways that we can collaborate and partner together. We work well together. We've looked at a variety of ways to team up on things. But the seriousness of the state aid erosion is continuing over a period of time.
Lori, Bernie wants to make a point here, but before he does, how much have your students, the student body, increased in size over the last few years?
46%.
And
so,
and that obviously indicates a need, because you
Right.
teach a lot of adults, a lot of non-traditional
Correct.
students, a lot of people who are unemployed and who are trying to get the
Right.
skills they need
Right,
in
and
order to get
and our
jobs.
technical college is the second largest geographical district, so we serve 10 counties. And so, but obviously our biggest percentage is in Wausau, but we've grown 46% in 4 years.
I can't do the math that quickly, but I'll tell you, 8 years ago, I joined the UW System Board of Regents, and at that time, the system-wide enrollment was around 160,000 students. And this year, it is around 182,000 students. I think what you're seeing is that the customers of this quality higher education are demanding more. They understand what it's going to take in order for them to prosper in a 21st century economy, whether it's the education they can get through the technical college system, the UW colleges, a 4-year degree, a PhD. They are increasingly very astute consumers, the students and the families. And they're not saying, you're pushing us into this, and that's why we're showing up. They're showing up and they're saying, we need the certifications, we need these degrees, we need these higher order skills in order to be able to do many, many jobs that 30 years ago you didn't need all that much education for. Well, that's the world that we're living in, and we have two competing things going on here. We've got this increased demand from people who say, I paid my taxes, these are public institutions, it is now my turn to get this educational service from these institutions. And I think what we're seeing is, the answer is, no, it is your turn, and you can get it, but you're going to have to pay a lot more of it than your brothers and sisters do.
10 years ago, what was state aid like for universities? How many pennies out of every dollar of tax money went to the schools?
Chancellor Patterson happens to have that on the tip of his tongue.
Yes, if I could only find my tongue. What I can tell you, Glenn, is that 2 decades ago, 18 cents of every tax dollar went to the university system, 18 cents. Today, it's 8 cents of every tax dollar goes to the university system. And with this new budget, it's going to be 6 cents for every tax dollar. So we've gone from 18 cents to 6 cents. That's a change in state priorities. Forget the recession, forget all the other issues. We have a pie to slice up. And our slice of our pie has gone from 18% to 6%. And so we're making decisions in this state about the quality of life and about our future. And we are not investing in education and in higher education, as clearly demonstrated by where we're spending our money.
How do you react when the governor and his supporters tell you we have a $3.6 billion deficit, we have to balance the budget, everybody's got to take his cuts and his lumps, including UW Stevens Point, the technical colleges in the UW system?
Well, I can start us off by saying that I understand that Wisconsin is facing a fiscal crisis and that we all need to do more with less. And I think our technical college is an example of one that has done more with less. You don't grow 46% and increase your budget only 1%, and this year be below the budget you had the year before. So I think we understood that. The technical college system was prepared to take our share of the state aid cut. We did not expect 30 and 30. You know, an answer of 10 and 10 was more realistic, but not 30 and 30. And so I think what we're trying to indicate here is I think we have shown that we are very cost effective, that we continue to look at how we can do things with less, and we're willing to take our share. We think the share that we were asked to give was more than was reasonable to ask.
I would agree, it is more than was reasonable to ask. When you go from 18 cents to 8 cents, we've already taken a huge cut. So we have to think about what the priorities are for this, or what they should be for the state. Of course, the budget has to be balanced. But that's when your priorities really, when you live your priorities, or how you fund them, tells you what really is important to you.
Yeah, and going ahead, education is an investment, because if people get better paying jobs, they're going to pay more taxes, and in turn that's going to feed right back into the state budget. So it's not as if, you know, people are paying these, students are paying higher tuition and just getting a private good here. I mean, it's investment for the benefit of the state in the long term. So it's something that certainly pays off in the long term for the state.
Mark Bradley?
I would mention, Glenn, none of us are elected officials, and we don't have the job of setting those priorities. But I agree with Chancellor Patterson that it is a matter, the state of Wisconsin is not broke. The state of Wisconsin has lots of revenue. The state of Wisconsin also has lots of expenses. So it ends up being the honor and privilege of those people that we elect to the Assembly and the Senate, and the people we elect as governors, to look at the revenue stream, look at the expenses, and then, as Chancellor Patterson said, decide on priorities. In my view, and living in this higher education world for the last 8 years, we are on the investment side. I do not believe that we are on the expense side. And I say that for two reasons. First of all, we're on the investment side because the students who are coming know, they've got some rough calculus in their mind about the payoff for them for getting the degrees that our institutions offer. The second thing is that if you look at the entire investment that we as taxpayers make in the University of Wisconsin system, there is a tenfold return on that investment. The state of Wisconsin, in rough numbers, if the state of Wisconsin is putting $1 billion into educating 182,000 students in the UW system, the state of Wisconsin, in return for that $1 billion investment, has a $10 billion impact on its economy. So I don't see that we're on the expense side. I see that we're on the return on investment side.
Mark Bradley, you really believe the state of Wisconsin isn't broke? Because if I had $1 for every time I've heard a politician say that over the last 3 months, I think I'd be able to retire the deficit myself.
I believe that it's a nice shorthand way of saying we have a large deficit. But you talk to anybody on public financing, and we are not broke. We are not on the threshold of going bankrupt as a state. We have very serious management problems in setting priorities, what not to spend money on, and also looking at our taxation system. Do we have a taxation system from an agricultural and manufacturing economy, or do we have a taxation system that is more in a modern service economy? These are big public policy questions that the legislature has the privilege of dealing with.
All of you assert that your schools are vital to the regional economy. Why do you believe that is the case, and how will budget cuts and tuition increases affect the economy of our region for the two-year schools in Wausau and Marshfield, and of course for North Central Technical College, the entire region, and Bernie, for your school, Stevens Point?
I'll give you one reason right now, and that is our ability to work with businesses and corporations in the private sector in developing jobs, research to jobs. We have on our campus the Institute for Sustainable Technology. We have some outstanding faculty and staff working in that center, including a young man by the name of Don Guay. And if you know him and you get to talk to him, you'll understand the research that's going on in his lab and how that transfers to its real application in the real world. Being able to attract and retain faculty like this will become more and more difficult, if not impossible. And we won't have the brain power here to work with the private sector to develop research to jobs to help fuel the economy.
Well, we have a technical college and UWMC have complementary missions, and we have complementary funding sources as well. When we had a business roundtable here in February, time and time again, we heard business people telling us that the certain skills that individuals have in their corporations, let's say it's an accountant or let's say it's a nurse, but when you look at the skills that leaders in those fields have, it's the liberal arts skills that you learn in the sort of general education that we provide here in UWMC. So there are hard skills in terms of technical skills, but there's the sort of people skills and management skills and thinking skills that people require, and that's what businesses are telling us. So we do provide something that is in demand in the economy, and increasingly in demand in the economy as we switch over to more of a health and education and financial services economy in Marathon County.
Lori?
Well, obviously, we provide skilled workers, pure and simple. If you need to have an electrician, you need an electrician. If you need a plumber, you need a plumber. If you know that Wisconsin is a manufacturing state, when manufacturing is healthy, so is the economy. We provide those skilled workers for manufacturing. We're also a very strong agricultural state. $51.2 billion a year is involved in the economic issues in agriculture. $2.1 billion just in Marathon County. The importance of having a strong agriculture and manufacturing presence in the states is essential to a strong economy. Who do you think provides the skilled workers for all of those positions? The technical college system. I think it's an important thing to know too is where you start does not necessarily mean where you end. So some of the things Keith talked about, the ability to do critical thinking, problem solving, continuing your education and your skill sets along with UWSP and the others is also very important. But when you need a skilled worker, who are you going to look to in higher ed? The technical college system. We've been doing it for a century. And in fact, we have our 100-year anniversary coming up next year. We've been doing it since 1912. And so we have a very, very tight and close working relationship with business and industry. We have advisory committees made up of business and industry who direct our curriculum and help us make decisions on where we go. And as we train workforce for the future skilled workers, we're currently training people for jobs that don't exist. So as you train people for the jobs that don't exist, you give them a certain level of technical skills, add the kinds of things that you need from critical thinking, problem solving, but we will be the future of Wisconsin, all of us in higher ed. But when you need skilled workers, it's the technical college system you're going to look to. And we're proud of that.
Glenn, our country has fallen from first place to 12th place in the number of young people with either a college degree or a 2-year degree or a certificate. When you translate that down to the state level, we see that Wisconsin is below the national average in terms of young people with college educations. Minnesota, on the other hand, is above the national average in terms of the number of young people with a college education.
We used to be tied.
Not anymore. We're below the national average, they're above the national
Per
average.
capita income, we're below as well.
And in per capita income, the gap between Minnesota and Wisconsin is $5,000 per person. If we could close that gap, and $5,000 per person, it would mean $29 billion more in the pockets of the citizens of this state. We have to have a higher educated workforce if we're going to fuel the economy we need to catch up.
How much is tuition going to go up at your respective institutions? Any idea? And to what extent are your hands tied by the state government?
Well, Mark would be probably better to respond to that because that's really a regent's decision, but we know what's in the bill. What's in the bill is a cap
I
at
can respond.
5.5%.
5.5, yeah.
And I can respond. The technical college system, our tuition rate is set at the state level at the Wisconsin Technical College System Board, and ours is going up 5.5%.
So people are going to be paying more and getting less.
Yes, on our campus, the cut's going to be $4 million this coming year and $4 million the next year. And if you haven't been in a classroom lately, you might be thinking, well, you know, all learning takes place in the classroom, so you get bigger classes, and so that's not great, but maybe you can manage. But what has set this state apart, what has set our university system apart, is the learning that goes on beyond the classroom. And that particularly in our regional institutions in this state, faculty working with students outside the classroom, whether it's in the lab or the studio or the field, is where they get that extra, that level of education that takes us way above the average. And that is at risk of disappearing and will be relegated to just what we can cram into a room and how many classes you can cram into a faculty member's schedule.
I think access and flexibility is the big issue for the technical college system. As fuel prices go up and you have students at a distance and they already are deciding if they're gonna go to school or eat, sometimes that fuel cost might be a little bit too much for them, so they decide not to continue their education. I think for the technical college system will be access and flexibility. That includes online courses, weekend offerings. When a company needed us to offer welding at 10 at night till 2 in the morning, we provided it. I think it's a bigger question about not that you're gonna pay more for less, but it's more about access and flexibility and our ability to respond based on what the customer, the business and industry needs and what the learners need. So that's the biggest concern for us from the technical college system. It's access and flexibility.
All right, Bradley?
You know, Chancellor Patterson mentioned that when you look at per capita income in the state of Wisconsin and per capita income in the state of Minnesota, we are $5,000 per person behind. Now, that strikes some people as rather curious because they say, I have friends in Minnesota and I know what I do for a living and I know what they do for a living, and you know, these salaries are not so different. Well, here's some detail behind those numbers, which is support for what I have come to conclude, that this is a huge priority issue for our elected officials. If you take the incomes in Wisconsin and the incomes in the state of Minnesota, the first 9 categories, the first 9 levels of income match up almost perfectly. So people doing those bottom 9 jobs in the state of Wisconsin in terms of levels of income and Minnesota line up almost identically. This $5,000 per capita difference ends up when you take the top 10% of people earning income in the state of Wisconsin and the top 10% of people earning income in the state of Minnesota. And those jobs require the higher order skills that we're talking about. These are the management jobs. These are the technical jobs where somebody comes out of NTC and knows how to operate these sophisticated machines, knows how to be an assistant in a hospital. It is those higher jobs, those jobs that are roughly starting somewhere around $70,000 a year and up. And that's where Minnesota outpaces the state of Wisconsin. Now, you look at whatever your crystal ball is for a 21st century economy in the Midwestern part of the United States. Do you think those jobs are going to be in more demand, or are those jobs going to be in less demand? Everything I read says that over time, those jobs are going to be in more demand. So either we are going to have the people with the training to be able to fill those jobs, or those jobs go somewhere else.
Dean Montgomery?
Well, I think as you alluded to a short while ago, Glenn, also if you look back over the last 10 to 15 years, the state of Wisconsin and the state of Minnesota have been going in opposite directions. As we've fallen below the national average, they've risen considerably above the national average. So the trend is not in the right direction as far as Wisconsin's concerned, and Marathon County is a microcosm of that. You know, we've fallen below the national average and continue to fall below the national average. And it seems to me that at some point you kind of get into a negative spiral. Communities that have good higher education institutions are going to be attractive communities, attractive to other people. I mean, one phenomenon is when you attract in professionals into a community, there's a phenomenon of what they call a trailing spouse, and family as well. And often that's the critical thing about whether that person's going to stay in that community. So if we have good, strong higher educational institutions, not just for education, but also for culture as well, as we have here in this terrific theatre, then that also makes those communities much more attractive and
Bernie, and then
retains
Mark.
people.
And there's a myth in this state, held by many people that, that we're losing our best and brightest students, and they're going elsewhere. The data do not support that. In fact, we are retaining our graduates here. At UW-Stevens Point, we keep 90% of our students right here. Of our out-of-state students who come to us, we are keeping even 1 in 5 of those don't even go back home. So there's not a brain drain, there is a lack of brain gain. And the reason for that was the reason that Mark was just now pointing out, the discrepancy in those higher salaries. Why come here when you can go to Minnesota or elsewhere and make significantly more money? So we absolutely suffer from a lack of brain gain, but there's not a brain drain.
My comment is, I was thinking, we're sitting in this beautiful facility, and this building is the UW Center for Civic Engagement. And this is a civic engagement. This is a big discussion about a very important public policy issue. And at this immediate time, both in the state of Wisconsin and nationally, it's just very easy to think of this, you can lapse into thinking this in partisan terms. But this is not a partisan issue. If you look at who was governor 30 years ago, whether it was a Republican or a Democrat, and then who got elected governor then, and then who got elected governor then, and then who got elected governor now, we have an assortment of Democratic and Republican Party governors. And this trend that we're talking about, everybody gets to take all the glory in the demise of Wisconsin's funding for public higher education, both Democrats and Republicans.
Let's move on to another proposal, and a proposal that is also generating bipartisan opposition and in some areas bipartisan support. And that's the idea of spinning off UW-Madison from the rest of the UW system, giving it public authority designation, creating a new board of regents to govern it, a board of 21 people with 11 appointed by Governor Walker, and also presumably giving it more autonomy and flexibility to administer programs in this era of tight budgets. What's your reaction? And Mark Bradley, let's start with you. What could be wrong with increased autonomy and flexibility for the state of Wisconsin's flagship institution?
Nothing. It is a brilliant idea, and it is something that every single CEO, every single chancellor of our campuses needs, the kind of administrative flexibilities that are part and parcel of what is called the New Badger Partnership. In order to understand this, if you listen to this and you sit back and you say, what group of people, what group of knowledgeable people about public policy, about higher education, about state government, what committee, what commission came up with this idea? None. This idea originally was the brainchild of Chancellor Biddy Martin, a brilliant administrator and someone who saw that the economic model for higher education, particularly for her campus, UW-Madison, is broken. So she had this idea of a way to fix it. And the idea was for the legislature to give the CEO of a large, complex institution the type of management ability, the type of management flexibilities to allow that person to be able to run this monster efficiently and more efficiently. That idea, very quickly after Governor Walker got elected, morphed into an idea of, well, it's not just asking for the statutory flexibilities to be able to run your campus without a lot of state bureaucratic involvement, but all of a sudden, and I mean all of a sudden, that concept was converted into a, we'll just spin you off and you will be your own campus. You will have your own board of trustees. You will set your own tuition. You will manage all of your own money. You'll have your own state or your payroll system for your employees. You'll no longer be part of the state pay plan. This change in that New Badger partnership was, to say the least, a complete shock to the Board of Regents.
It took you by surprise. You had no inkling that this was coming?
None. So when you ask, what do you think about this idea? when you explain the idea, what I have found around the state is people just, they can't understand why we're even discussing this because it just doesn't seem to make sense. And it wasn't developed by a broad-based coalition. It wasn't a blue ribbon commission that came up with this idea.
But yet you're saying the core of her idea, which is giving schools more autonomy and flexibility, is a good one.
It is brilliant. And as I said at a different forum, second to Chancellor Martin, I'm the second biggest fan in the state of Wisconsin of the New Badger partnership from the standpoint of saying that campus CEO, and just like this campus CEO, needs statutory changes to be able to run these complex institutions the way a lot of business people assume that they are run, but they are not. Horribly inefficient, with layers and layers of regulations that nobody in their right mind, if you sat down and designed it from scratch, would ever come up with. They're literally layers that have evolved just over years and years and years. The Board of Regents, in response to the Governor Walker's proposal, where he put in his budget this idea that the Madison campus would be a freestanding entity, its own governing board, its own control of its own money, hiring all of its own people, out from under state regulations. The response that the Board of Regents came up with, adopted by 13 out of the 14 chancellors, by every UW college dean, by the majority of faculty senates in the state and the majority of student senates in the state. That proposal, which we call the Wisconsin Idea Partnership, it's the whole state of Wisconsin, says these statutory flexibilities are very good ideas, and our campus leaders need them. So the Wisconsin Idea Partnership asks for these administrative flexibilities for every four-year campus and not just one.
Let's start with Bernie and then Keith.
Man, I'm not sure we have enough time tonight for me to tell you all the reasons I think that this is a bad idea, but let me just give you a few. One, it's bad for business.
And you're talking about spinning off UW-Madison as a
Yes,
separate
I'm talking about the
institution.
spinoff, yes.
Yeah, I take it you want the flexibility and the autonomy?
Oh, of course, absolutely. It's critical, as Mark's already said, that is absolutely a critical piece of what needs to happen to be able to manage our resources. But the spinoff isn't necessary to obtain those flexibilities. It's just not. I think it's bad for business. Businesses like Marshfield Clinic and Century Insurance and Point and Greenneck fans here, part of the way they're able to recruit their top talent is to be able to point to a UW system institution in their backyard. And if that goes away, then it makes it harder for them to recruit the very best talent they can from all over the country, if not the world. I've already talked about the Institute for Sustainable Technology. Being able to attract quality people there will be much more difficult.
You think UW-Stevens Point will be hurt if it's no longer affiliated with UW-Madison?
I think absolutely it will. Recruitment of faculty, for example. This system has a national, if not international reputation, and that is very important in recruiting faculty to all of our campuses across the state. It's the idea that there will be two boards is just, I just can't understand why we think that might be a good idea. Harry Peterson, one of the leading experts on higher education systems, has described that as a political model rather than a professional model. And he's described what he anticipates what he calls the chancellors will be beggars with briefcases, camped out in the halls of the state capitol, competing one board against the other board.
And that phrase, beggars with briefcases, was widely used 40 years ago before we brought the entire University of Wisconsin system together, because that's, I wasn't here at the time, but people who were here tell me that you had each individual chancellor going down to Madison, each begging for his piece of the pie.
That's right. And when you think about how it will affect the students directly, transferability has been a major priority in this system, particularly with our regents and across the campuses, and that is at risk. I think it will lead to mission creep, which will lead to credit creep, which will lead to more time to the degree, which will result in higher costs for our students. I told the regents when they held their special meeting last month that while flexibility is really important, this piece of the story feels a lot more like it's about getting a divorce than about flexibility, and that we just got served recently with those divorce papers And in any divorce, the people who suffer the most are the children. And in this case, we have 182,000 students that we need to be thinking about. I just can't tell you, Glenn, how much I think this is a bad idea. As we used to say in Georgia, that dog won't hunt.
Keith Montgomery, how will a split of UW-Madison from the other UW system affect UW-Marathon County, UW-Marshfield-Wood County, and the other two-year schools?
Can I just go back on one point before that? The title, The New Wisconsin Idea Partnership, is a very resonant one, I think, because, Laurie talked about agriculture and the significance of agriculture. When you look at the original Wisconsin idea in the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was very much bound up with the UW-Madison and what became UW Extension, performing research in direct aid to the state's economy, and some of the most famous research that was done was concerned with agriculture and agricultural research. So one concern about spinning Madison off is that it might serve its own needs in terms of its national and global reputation and the research that it does, but it doesn't necessarily provide the same expertise to the state's economy. So I think that particular title resonates historically, I think. UWMC, well, maybe this is where I shouldn't go, but was UWMC hurt in 1971 when the system was reorganized, and up until then UWMC was directly connected to Madison? Well, the fact is that, times were changing then, and and our students, well, we were primarily a transfer institution for Madison. The fact is our students now transfer throughout the entire system. And so what you have here is one application process. You've got guaranteed transfer. You get library resources that our students can use. They can get stuff out of Madison's library by the end of this week if they need that for the research that they do. So I think there's potential there to really harm the system as it works, and the system, the reasons why the system was formed was to realize advantages in terms of costs, in terms of processes, and all of those things are a big advantage to students. They're part of a system.
Lori Wires, this question of transferability, you're concerned about that as well if there's a split.
Right. We've worked very hard in the technical college system to have transferability for our students. I don't know if the audience knows, but there's not one single associate degree program at NTC that does not transfer junior status. So again, as I stated before, we are the largest transfer institution going to the UW system. Our concern is on our technical college system board right now, we have representatives from the Board of Regents. In this legislation, it would add another member that would come from the board of whatever trustees from the UW-Madison. So we now have two parties sitting on the technical college system board. For our students, the big issue is transferability. We want to make sure that it's not impacted negatively in allowing students to continue their educational journey. And so we're very concerned about what would that mean from a transferability standpoint that we've worked so very diligently and very hard with the UW system to acquire. What will be the impact for our learners? And for us, it's all about our learners, and remembering that where you start your journey is not necessarily where you end your journey. So if it has a negative impact on transferability, it's an issue for the technical college system.
Will this put a UW-Madison education out of the reach of many, many children in Wisconsin, Mark Bradley?
Well, the estimates are that when you spin UW-Madison campus off and then say to it, here's a block grant, here's a chunk of state money, now you go run that institution however you think is best. They know they're going to have to increase tuition in order to be able to even stay doing what they're doing today, because they would take a significant decrease, a 13% decrease in state appropriations, with the idea that they would backfill that with tuition. So the figures that I've seen is that we would expect in the state of Wisconsin that at just the Madison campus, tuition over the next 2 years would go up a little over 10% per year. Now, that now is a double-digit increase. What has happened for the last 4 years, every single year, is that the Board of Regents, looking at the affordability of the Madison campus, the Milwaukee campus, and every other campus, have tried to come up with a budget for the UW system that had moderate, predictable increases in tuition. And for the last 4 years, they have been 5.5% per year, and not the 10, 11, and 12% increases.
As much as an increase in tuition for in-state tuition could potentially affect access. The other thing that's in play is, and I know Madison has arguments, I know they have arguments, but the other thing that becomes attractive is out-of-state tuition as well, because the out-of-state students really pay a premium. And so, you know, if you look at Michigan, and I think Madison doesn't like that comparison, but if you look at Michigan, you look at the University of Michigan, they have much higher out-of-state students, because simply they're paying a premium, and you can get more tuition for more tuition per student there. So I think that would also affect access as well, not just the in-state tuition, but there would definitely be there'd be less slots, or there'd be some pressure.
We've got kind of a seamless way of taking credits from the 4-year and 2-year schools, and even from North Central Technical College, and applying those if a student wants to transfer to UW-Madison. Is it your opinion that may go by the wayside?
Well,
Well, I was to be as fair as possible to our colleagues in Madison, the statements from there indicate that would continue, and the collaborations will continue. My point tonight is simply that there's a new board on the horizon, yet to be appointed, the majority appointed by the current administration, the current governor. And so nobody is in a position to make those promises, no one that has that kind of authority. So whether it's transferability or our name or whatever it might be, there's yet another entity that will come into play and have a strong opinion about those things. So saying that those will continue just is nothing more than speculation. And it may be wishful
Are you
thinking.
worried that UW-Madison might get politicized if we create this brand-new Board of Regents and you give one man, the governor, the right to appoint 11 of the 21, essentially giving him majority control?
Well, my concern there is that it's for a 3-year term. The governor appoints the current board as well, and Mark can speak to this.
But it's
much better
spread
than I
out
can.
over a number of years, which
Right,
means
and therefore
that,
over more than one administration.
practically speaking, more than one administration appoints the regents.
That's true.
well, Mark, what's the term on the regents right now? Is it 6 years, 7 years?
No, it's a 7-year term, and, you know, they're staggered, and that is exactly what the rule was designed to accomplish when the system was created 40-some years ago. And that is that whenever there would be a vacancy, whoever that governor is has the ability to appoint, but the state senate is who approves those appointees. The proposal that is in the governor's budget for the spinoff of the Madison campus has the governor appointing the majority of the members of the Board of Trustees. They're for 3-year terms instead of 7-year terms. There is no governing body of a large system in the entire United States that has members with terms of less than 6 years. The standard is 6, some are 7. We, the Board of Regents, are 7. But this other part about how do you end up finally getting to be able to take a seat at this policy table? Currently, you might get appointed by a governor, but then you've got to go through a testimony in front of a Senate committee. They can ask you what you think about tuition. They can ask you what you think about financial aid, building programs, stem cell research, faculty tenure, academic freedom. They can ask you any of that, and they can argue with you. And then they can say, I don't think this person is qualified. The current proposal has the governor with a majority of appointments on this Board of Trustee, and once you're appointed, you simply show up at a meeting. I think that this Senate committee oversight, the questioning in public about what somebody thinks, first of all, just asking somebody, do you know anything about higher education? Have you ever read anything about this? What's your experience? I think we're really missing something if we don't have that level of public scrutiny about these appointees.
An economic development group associated with regional chambers of commerce, Centergy, has just come out in opposition to the proposed split. I'm wondering if any of you would like to comment on that.
Well, one of the things that they're in favor of is the Wisconsin Idea Partnership, because that they see, and the local chamber of commerce as well, because they see that as conferring certain benefits to the local economy, because the same, as Mark says, the same flexibilities that in the Badger Partnership also apply to the Wisconsin Idea Partnership, and that would include certain freedom in purchasing decisions. And so instead of having to always go to the state contract, we'd have much more freedom to buy locally, which would put more money into local businesses.
But they're opposed to spinning off UW-Madison from the other schools, is that
Oh,
correct?
absolutely, yeah.
Yes, they are.
But they're in favor of the flexibilities
Yeah.
for all the campuses, which is what the Board of Regent position is.
This is a group that represents local businesses. Bernie, have you talked to businesses in the region, say the folks at Marshfield Clinic, and asked them how they feel about the UW split idea?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, we were meeting with, our provost was meeting with 4 of their top executives just days after this was made known to the rest of us. And they were very concerned and opposed to the split off. And the fact that Synergy is opposed to it as well, I think speaks volumes. These are business people. They understand how business needs to work and how it needs to be, how it needs to function. And to say, for them to say the spin-off's a bad idea, the flexibilities are a good idea, I think is very insightful on their part, and certainly something we need to pay attention to, because we do have to manage our resources more like a business does. We're not a business, but we need to adopt some of their practices if we're going to deal with fewer resources.
Now, this proposal has been hit by bipartisan criticism. Luther Olson, Republican state senator from Ripon, and Assemblyman Steve Noss, who's a Republican assemblyman from Whitewater, have both expressed strong reservations about the idea of splitting UW-Madison off. Do you think there are enough votes to pass this in the Assembly and the Senate?
Well, first of all, I'd mention that Senator Olson is a very influential member of the Senate in the Republican Party. Representative Noss just happens to be the chair of the Assembly Colleges and Universities Committee. So it means a little bit more than just some member of the legislature who says, I don't think this is a good idea. Personally, I think that the action on all this is primarily going to take place between now and June. As we mentioned, this concept of spinning off the Madison campus and giving it its own authority is in the biennial budget bill. The Joint Finance Committee has that bill. They've concluded their public hearings. They now will be discussing what types of amendments that they're ready to offer to the governor's bill, and that amended bill will probably come out to the entire legislature early, mid-June. If you look at history, about 90% of what comes out of the Joint Finance Committee amended bill ends up getting enacted into law. So I think the important thing is going to be between now and the time Joint Finance comes up and might say, as Senator Olson has suggested, just take this big policy issue out of a budget bill and let us debate it. Let us have this kind of a discussion all over the state of Wisconsin with members of the legislature who ultimately get to decide this question. Another idea is keep the concept in, but extend it to all of the campuses and not just one of them. On the other hand, the other alternative is it will not be changed at all, and it'll be voted on in June, July, or August, and it'll pass.
Let's look at a few other items in the budget, and I'm talking specifically about the budget repair bill now. The elimination of collective bargaining rights by public employees. We've had a number of UW schools, including the faculty at UW Stevens Point, Bernie, that have just voted to form unions, presumably in response to this move by the governor. Is this a Howell effort on their part, since a lot of the collective bargaining rights have been eliminated? Or do you think this will change the way administrators and teachers have traditionally gotten along in Stevens Point?
Well, we have a deep tradition there of working very well together. And of course, I was not at all surprised by the vote. It was something like 6 to 250 or something. What surprised me were the 6. But I don't think it will change. It won't change what's in people's hearts on our campus. They have stepped up in ways you would not believe. To be there, of course they expressed their points of view passionately, as they certainly should. But they have kept their eye on the prize. They've kept their eye on our mission, and our mission is simply student success. And so they've been there for the students at every turn through these very hard times in particularly the last 3 months. So I don't think, well, it depends on what happens with the bill, the budget repair bill. I mean, if it becomes law, then they basically have been decertified. If it doesn't, then we'll have a collective bargaining unit.
What is morale like among the teachers on your staffs, given the pay cuts, the attacks on unions, and what some have called the demonization of teachers and other public workers?
That's a very unfortunate characterization, but I think some people have to own that because that's what they've done, because I've heard them myself do it. They have not been standing shoulder to shoulder with our faculty and our staff who come early in the mornings and leave late at night and are there on weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, to work with the students in every possible way. I could not be more proud of a group of individuals than I am of our faculty and our staff and what they've done for our students.
Just a second, Mark. Keith Montgomery at UW Marathon County, what's morale like among the teachers here?
Well, it's like a 12 to 14% pay cut. And the faculty are paid, most of them are paid 9 months, and then when you get to the end of May, there's then a substantial amount of money has to be paid to cover benefits over the summer. And so it's actually a big chunk of money that's going to come out that last paycheck. And so some faculty, and certainly across the colleges as a whole, are looking at how they're going to make it through the summer with that type of cut in their take-home pay at the end of the academic year.
And Lori Wires at North Central Technical College, 30% cut. You've just announced layoffs. What's morale like?
Not the best. It's a very challenging time, but I think it's more from an impact of looking at the learner. As you know, we've had a large influx of displaced workers, dislocated workers who look to us for having a better quality of life. So we look at the tremendous needs. We have 78% of our students need financial aid. So our concern obviously stems around being able to provide those services, and we're very, very concerned about that. So right now, morale is not very good at the college, but again, our college has stepped up and are trying to keep the focus on our learner and to continue to serve them. So that's what we're going to continue to do.
Mark Bradley, I want you to weigh in on this too.
Well, I just wanted to make this comment. I'm not an educator. I don't work for the university. I've never been a faculty member or department chair. But I'll share with you an observation that my colleagues on the Board of Regents have shared with me, and it's been my experience. We go to these campuses. Every regent is assigned to have primary responsibility for 2 campuses a year. And you get to know those campuses. You get to know the leaders of the faculty, the student leaders, the chancellor, the chancellor's cabinet, what their long-range plans are. And then next year, you're going to have 2 other 4-year campuses. And then you also have 1 2-year campus that you are supposed to be paying most attention to. So with that as background, I'll tell you that the experience of these private citizens who are setting policy but need to understand how these institutions work. The experience goes like this. You visit the campus, you meet with the chancellor and maybe members of the chancellor's senior staff, but then you're brought into a room where there are a group of faculty members. And typically, the chancellor says, here you are, I'll see you in about 45 minutes, and then shuts the door and walks out. So you're a member of the Board of Regents, and you're in this room of faculty members, and you're all by yourself. And they don't have any qualms about what they're going to say to you. What everybody expects they're going to talk about is the pay plan this year was 0, or the pay plan was 0.5% after it has been 0 for the last 2 years, or I'm going to complain about this, or I'm going to complain about that. We all can be very, very proud because the true story is this. What they start talking about is their inability to do the job that they want to do for the students. It is absolutely reaffirming. It is heartwarming to see these people who have got a number of things they could be complaining about to a member of the Board of Regents. Their first topic is always to give you a list of what they are not able to do in order to get these kids educated.
other parts of the budget. The end of the Wisconsin Covenant Program, which provided access to a university education for any high school student with good grades. Anyone want to weigh in on that?
Sure, that was a program identified with a Democratic governor, and a Republican governor doesn't need a governor's program.
How about cuts to K through 12? $900 million in cuts. It also keeps school districts from increasing the tax levy to make up the difference. How will cuts to public grade schools and high schools in our state filter up to public universities and colleges? Anyone got an
Well,
opinion?
that's the same, I mean, the cumulative effect of cuts through the 90s and through the first decade of the century has been enormous. I'm on the local school board. I mean, one of the biggest concerns that I have in this budget is the cuts to the kindergarten programs. I mean, those are absolutely foundational in terms of learning. And they'll tell you, that in the first 2 or 3 years of school, that's where things are often set in terms of your learning. And so those cuts especially, I think, are very hard to take in this budget.
Lori?
Many times in that kind of a budget, the first thing looked at are technical education programs, business ed, many of the occupational areas. So obviously it's a concern to us because there'll be no feeder program into students who really are looking at other alternatives and going directly into an occupational training program. So when those kind of cuts happen, those kinds of things get put on the cutting block first. So from the technical college system, we're very concerned about the availability of the K-12s being a feeder into these technical areas, and we're going to need them. In the smaller rural communities, you're seeing the tech ed is not able to even be an option because of the cost for it. So we're very concerned about how that's going to be addressed and how we continue to work together to try to provide the necessary skilled worker that are going to be needed for the future of Wisconsin's economy, and how we get those into the proper fields as they continue looking at their educational opportunities. So we're very concerned about that.
I'll give you 2 items of good news.
Okay.
There are no furloughs in this budget. Now, there are pay cuts because people have to contribute more to their health insurance and they have to contribute more to their retirement. But there are no furloughed employees in this next biennium, which is good news in this budget. Another bit of good news is that there's an item called cost to continue. And without getting in the details, it's just your fixed costs. And is the state of Wisconsin, in a tough budgetary time, even going to give you your cost to continue? This budget fully funds cost to continue. You might not think that's a big deal. Some of Governor Doyle's budgets did not fully fund cost to continue. That is a management challenge for a head of an institution. And finally, the physical plant budget, the money that is available for a campus chancellor to be able to maintain, improve, and build new buildings, happens to be, I think, historically a very generous budget. But you can't educate undergraduate students on a capital budget. What we've been talking about is the operating budget, and that's where we've got the problem.
The University of Wisconsin system has put forth an ambitious plan to increase the number of university degree holders in the state. How does central Wisconsin and northern Wisconsin stack up as regions compared with the rest of the state in the level of education among our populations? And Mark, are we meeting your goals?
No, we are not meeting the goals. In order to, our goal for the state of Wisconsin is to get back even with the state of Minnesota. And that is going to take a lot of degrees granted over the next 20 years. I don't know the numbers by heart, how we are in central Wisconsin with our percentage of degree holders. I'm sure Centergy has that figure.
It varies tremendously. I mean, 20%, a little less than 20% in Marathon County, and adjacent counties to the west and north, you'd be down to 10% in terms of degree holders.
Then what we're talking about is the growth agenda. And unfortunately, one of the things not funded in this new budget are the dollars needed to continue that initiative. That doesn't mean we're giving it up. We're going to continue to push towards those same goals. Most of it is not by recruiting new students into the university system, but to make sure that the students we already have succeed at a higher rate. In other words, increase our retention rate and increase our graduation rate. The retention rate at at UW-Stevens Point is now at 82%. That's very high and far above the national average, which is in the low 70s. And we're aiming at 85% or higher. So if we can be more efficient with our dollars by having an increased retention and graduation rate, making those dollars go further. For one graduate, we don't want to have to offer 3 seats in English 101. We want to just offer 1 and do it 1 time rather than do it 3 times to get 1 graduate.
I think it's also important to remember that you're always going to be a lifelong learner. You're going to be required to go back to school to continue your credentials in order to be competitive in the labor market. That's a fact of life. A lot of different professions require recertification. We do all the continuing ed training for police, fire, health, the nurses, the sonographer, all of that. And that's also with all of us. But I think we also have to remember that we will be lifelong learners. And if we are going to compete in a global economy, we're not going to just graduate and be done. We're going to continue to go back to school, and need more training. I'm an example. I went back to get my doctorate at UW-Madison when I was 46. It took me 6 years, but doggone, I got it done. But that doesn't mean you don't continue your learning. And so as we look at, yes, this is the first time they come through education, but we're all going to be seeing them again. And there's going to be a continued need because we are not in an economy just with the Midwest states or Minnesota or whatever. We're in a global economy. Take a look where the U.S. competes with China and India, and we don't fare so well. So we got to look at a broader concept as well, is that we will have to be continually learning, and we all play a role in that continuing learning arena. And that's very important for all of us to remember as well.
And I would guess my final question is, would be a spin-off on that, Lori. How are we going to, and I'm going to borrow a phrase from President Obama, win the future for America and keep us competitive in high-tech fields with the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Germans, and the Indians, when they are all investing huge amounts of money into education at the grade school, high school, and college levels, while we're imposing drastic budget cuts? And I'd like you to all to weigh in on that one at a time.
Well, I think that says it all. I think we go back to Mark's comments about a return on investment. Education is a return on investment. For every dollar invested in the technical college system, you get $4 back from a taxpayer who contributes to the economic climate of Wisconsin. $1 in, $4 out. And I think that's the same as we look at all of education. I think we need to understand that this is really an investment in our economic future in Wisconsin. It is an investment. And so I think we have to look at it very differently than it's a drain. It is really an investment. And 97% of technical college graduates in the state of Wisconsin stay in Wisconsin.
Bernie Patterson?
And I'm not sure, was it Wilson that said that we can't build the future for our children, but we can build our children for the future? And we have to make sure that our young people are prepared for what they're going to confront, whether it's the global economy or diversity or economic development or whatever the challenge might be. And we can't do that without an investment in our educational system. That's the bottom line.
Keith Montgomery?
I talked about India and China investing in technical and technological and education, but one of the geniuses of our education system and the big advantage that we have and what attracts those students still to America is the breadth of education that we insist upon, and it's that creates creativity and flexibility in our graduates. So that's true whether you're talking about engineers, whether you're talking about computer scientists, whether you're talking about doctors. I mean, that's the global advantage that we have over them still.
And Mark Bradley?
Well, I am an optimist at heart, and I think that if the information is clearly presented to people in this state, they get that connection between the investment in education and the impact on the quality of life in this state and the economy in this state. So I appreciate the opportunity to have a discussion like this, and I think we all thank you for arranging this, and I think this is what has to happen, and it's not going to turn overnight, but we just have to keep at it, and I think that the people's understanding of what it needs for us to enjoy this area of the world will prevail.
Any of you have a question that you'd like to ask our panelists? We've got a microphone here.
right, I have a question on tutoring. As we know, a lot of students arrive probably at the tech, and I know at the colleges, from high school, basically unprepared for their first year. What's going to happen to that segment of preparation at your institutions specifically under this proposed budget cut?
I certainly can comment. We have what we call our learning centers at all of our colleges that provide remediation, reading, math, et cetera. They're both funded by state funds as well as federal funds. We're going to see a reduction in the number of faculty and staff that we can participate in that program. We won't have as many faculty in there, so we're taking a cut there, and you'll note that tomorrow in the newspaper. From a tutorial standpoint, again, we were going to have some limitations on our ability to provide the tutoring we have in the past. That will be impacted negatively as well. We're going to try to regroup and do the best we can, but our resources have been diminished by the budget.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I'll add that a social problem that this country has struggled with in probably every state has been sometimes the gap between where a high school graduate is when they leave high school and where they need to be when they enter college. And this state has done a lot of work in trying to close that gap. But a minute ago, we were talking about the effects of the budget cuts on K-12. So as they are less able to prepare students for college, and we're less able to take students who are not adequately prepared for college, that gap will not close but widen, which presents yet more problems for us to solve in the future.
You know, just a point to add, I don't know if you're aware that we have 365,000 people in this state who do not have a high school diploma. These are the individuals that have been dislocated or displaced many times in their positions. So they're going to come at a disadvantage because they are going to need remediation in many areas, and sometimes they forgot it. You don't use it, you lose it, or in many cases they don't have it. So it's broader. Bernie's right with the K-12 and narrowing the gap, but you got to remember a returning adult, with many of us deal with. These skills can be they've forgotten them, they've lost them, or they never had them. But still in the state of Wisconsin, we have many, many individuals that do not have a high school diploma who have now been displaced and now have to compete in a global economy. Big issue.
Yeah, the school district is working on it as well. It's working on it.
I am very motivated to listen to you talk about the data and the budget deficiencies that's going to impact on all of your institutions and some rearrangement. But I came with the future of education. So you all describe in many ways the problems. What do we do about the future? Do we lobby? Do we educate the electorate to lobby? What do we do? I mean, we're singing to our hymn. We're singing to ourselves. You all agree,
Yep.
but what do we do from here?
I think you make some very good suggestions, and that's help us spread the word about the current situation and help us solicit ideas about where to go in the future. Something that we're already doing, just as an example, under the leadership and the encouragement of President Wires here, we are forming a coalition of not only the university, but the 3 technical schools in the area and the 2 two-year colleges in the area have come together already to look for more ways that we can work together, more ways that our transferability will become even more transparent, and more ways that we can collaborate on degree programs so that the taxpayers' dollars go further. And that's already in the works. But we're certainly open to other suggestions and other ways to solve the problems.
Are all these institutions lobbying together too?
Absolutely. Why not?
One thing that I think is going to be needed is, as we move forward, I think education will look differently, and I think that we will probably run more like a business than we have in the past, but I also think it's going to be important for us to have partnerships and collaborations both with business as well, and I'll give you an example. Our Center of Excellence in Agriculture, we have a partnership with Case IH, where they are a Wisconsin-based company. They're very supportive of agriculture, continue to be important in the state of Wisconsin, and have stepped up and have gifted us each year $2 million for all the state-of-the-art equipment for 10 years. A technical college could not do that on a partnership on their own, but Case IH is investing in their future, and that they want the future farmers to see the latest and best technology, and they're sharing it with the technical college system. Haas Manufacturing brings in their CNC machines for our machine tool, and we formed a partnership where we're now a demonstration site. They bring in the customers, they get to look at the equipment, we get to use it for our students. So again, we have made efforts to look at how we can partner up with business and how they can work with us to do some of the things we have to do. These are some of the things that are already being done in education and will also be important to continue to do. And as Bernie said, we are teaming up. We are looking at avoiding duplication. We have students that live in the residence halls at UWMC that we don't have residence halls, so we partner up. We use library resources together, and so that we don't have to all buy the different databases and things like that. So we're already doing many things, but I think it's going to be an understanding that in many countries around the world, business and education partner up, and it's a responsibility of both. And so I see those kinds of things of needing to be important, and you're right, we will look differently. But it's going to have to be a new collaboration, a new partnership together, and the understanding of what's going to take to be successful, and that's a partnership.
Well, Dave, you're right. I mean, traditionally, the colleges is a very centralized funding model. So money's come into our central office in Madison, and it gets funneled out to the campuses and kind of just falls from the sky, I guess. But the new, I'm not talking about funding levels, but the way in which the money is dispersed. Locally, we're going to be much more responsible for meeting certain financial targets. And so what that's meant is that we have to say, well, what do our local communities need? Certainly, you know, the core of our business is going to be transfer. It's going to be high school students coming to our campuses and wanting to transfer. But it's meant that we've had to really look at our local community and talk to people in our local community much more than we've ever had to do before, and to recognize what their needs are, and to come up with some new and innovative programs and partners that we've never even thought about before, particularly in the business community. And so we've had a couple of business roundtables on campus, as perhaps you know, and that's going to continue into the future. And these are, you know, often we were talking about particularly small business people. These are people that often have never had a strong connection to this campus. And so I think what you're going to find is you're going to find some stronger connections there as we look to partner more with local communities. I'm not sure if that totally answers your question, but...
Anyone else?
I'm very concerned about the huge drop in investment over the last 10 years from the state level. But I'm intrigued by Mark Bradley's comments about how our revenues might change to better support our educational systems. You said something, Mark, about our revenues might need to change for the service-based economy versus the old agricultural-based economy. What kind of things might happen there?
Well, I'll just give you a small example. I don't know what the numbers are, but there are millions of dollars of economic activity that come through, or more, that come through services in a modern day economy than the production of goods. And we still have a system that assumes that most economic activity is from the sale of a product as opposed to the provision of a service. If we were sitting down today from scratch and we were going to design a revenue system and what streams of revenue we are going to tap into, what we are going to tax, we definitely would be looking at what is becoming the largest part of our economy, and that is the service sector. But we don't tax that because we have a system that was designed years and years ago. Now, I'll just give you a little example. If you make something and I buy it from you, I'm going to have to, or you're going to have to charge me a sales tax. Now, if you hire me and I provide a service to you, that isn't subject to any sales or use tax. But I think if we were sitting down fresh, we would say, what's the difference between you selling me a product and me selling you a service? It's just it's an event that occurs in an economy, but we don't tax that. You know, I could send you a bill for $500. You don't pay any sales or use tax on that, but yet if you sold me something you manufactured, I'd pay a sales tax on that. There's just a small example.
Tax dollar might get, the tax pie might get bigger.
Well,
Still have some problems, and, you know, if we went from 15% of the state revenue being invested
Well, the top five are corrections.
Corrections.
K through 12, aid to municipalities, and then the university system. And, you know, if you were a governor, once you get past the top five categories, you really have chump change to run the rest of the state. It just, those top five things just soak up so much of your spending.
We've compared ourselves several times tonight to Minnesota. So another interesting comparison is to note that our incarceration rate here is much higher than it is in Minnesota. I think we can connect those dots pretty easily. I can tell you as a criminologist, prisons are not the answer to the problems in this state.
Well, there's a direct correlation between level of education and inmates. The higher your education, the less you're gonna be in prison. The lower your education, the more you'll be in prison. So there's a correlation there. Actually, we run a program at the Marathon County Jail to help students get their high school diploma. It's astounding how many people have dropped out of school, 8th grade, 9th grade. And once they get into our program and start getting education, believe in themselves, the recovery as they get out and get into the workforce and continue their learning certainly has an impact. So education is part of the solution to having less people in jail. Well, that and not committing the crimes they did too, so that would be helpful as well.
This question is more about the relationship between public policy and education. And if you have some thoughts on it, and I know, Dr. Patterson, you mentioned lobbying, for example, that various educational institutions could lobby with regard to policies. But one of the things that's so shocking about our situation, at least for some, is the whole idea about collective bargaining being in the bill, as well as, Mark, you mentioned that the regions didn't even know about this break with UW-Madison and the rest of the system. Are there any thoughts that you might have about how we could improve that process so that we as citizens and as educators could know more about what's being proposed so that we could debate it, deliberate it, and so forth?
How can we all keep from being kept in the dark?
I think you have to insist that the leaders in this state are open and transparent, and that we go about decisions in a collective public conversation. And you have to say as citizens that we don't want leaders that work behind closed doors.
That's not at all.
Anyone else? I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Which is part of the University of Wisconsin system,
Yeah.
you know.
By extension.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for joining us today. Also,
Thank you.
thanks to Mark Bradley, Bernie Patterson, Keith Montgomery, and Lori Wires. Thanks also to the staff at all three of these institutions of higher learning, UW-Stevens Point, UW-Marathon County, and North Central Technical College. Thanks to the Center for Civic Engagement and Rick Ryer and Chris Berg, who is running all the knobs there behind the darkened glass. And a reminder that none of the proposed changes in the state budget have been approved yet. And if you do have concerns or questions, you can still call your state senator and assemblyman to discuss the issue. I'm Glenn Moberg. Thanks for joining us this evening. Until next time, good night and drive carefully.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, folks.